Pacific
Islander. Did you say Pacific Highlander?
Pacific Highlander. Where the fuck would they be?
I don't know, but there can only be one.
They're remaking that movie, by the way. I'm
Are they really?
interested in watching it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I feel like Jason Momoa would be the Pacific Highlander.
Actually, yeah. If we had to cast that.
I think it's going to star Henry Cavill.
Oh.
As the Pacific Highlander?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that Ghost in the Shell movie.
Even though I like Henry Cavill, I think like the interviews that I've seen with him, all of that, very charming and stuff. I don't know that I've ever like really been blown away by any of his performances, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same.
I randomly really like that movie, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which he's...
I was going to say, I think he's quite good in that.
Yeah.
Maybe
all three of the leads in that are great.
Now it's cursed because of Army Hammer.
Yeah.
But,
that cannibal.
It is quite good, though. I actually really recommend watching it. I think it's a delight. It's a real shame it made zero money, and also that Army Hammer canceled himself.
Yeah. He really
now
did.
he can go sell timeshares in Bermuda. Which I literally think is what he's doing.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
His story's crazy.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm 100% serious. I think he is selling timeshares.
Yeah, he like got chased out of America essentially because
yeah, basically.
So I'm trying to remember.
We need to do a whole bonus episode on Army Hammer.
His sexual fantasies were cannibalism, or he literally.
I think that was part of it.
Like more intense BDSM than his partners were ready for, and also kind of like verging into like non-consensual stuff.
Yeah.
And like some unsavory fantasies. I don't think he ever like actually did
unsavory
anything,
or too savory.
We need that little
Yeah, we do.
Save that.
You better get a soundboard. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's probably an app for that.
Useful. That's crazy, though. Wow. How the Winklevoss twins have fallen.
Yeah, truly.
There's a documentary, I think either on Hulu or Max, that I watched that kind of covers it. And supposedly it seems like it's generational, like his father and I think his brothers or something like that. For sure his dad was also a creep like that.
When you have a long line of people who have been too rich
much
to
money.
work,
Yeah.
you simply curate some strange tastes to entertain yourself. I'm not saying that like you can have a weird cannibalism kink and that's fine, but like just don't push it on other people. And you know.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, on that topic, Jake, do you want to take us?
All right, everybody take a breath. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Lights, Camera, Accolade. We are here for the bonus month of May episode for you guys, where we're going to focus in on Asian and Pacific Islander month. We had a cool discovery in preparing for this episode in that we weren't really sure where to start because unfortunately, very unfortunately, while Sarah found a great early Chinese-American filmmaker, her film was lost to time. So here in this era of the 20s and the 30s, sadly, there's just not a lot of material in terms of Asian American produced films. So we had to look abroad a little bit. And so we're crossing the Pacific and visiting a country that I'm sure a lot of our listeners enjoy, called Japan. And we, in the course of doing a little bit of research, discovered this really interesting kind of cinematic blip in history, in a context and a place that I didn't know existed until we stumbled across this. Well, I'll just preface and give a little bit of a historical overview. And sorry, I know some folks think I go overboard with that, but here we go. So Japan much
was created as a country.
Yeah, no, we're not going to go too far back. Not too far back. But I do think it's important to keep in mind that in the early 20th century, which is still the period that we're talking about, specifically the late 20s into the early 30s, Japan was a very young country in terms of its presence on the international stage and its introduction to modernity. A lot of people will know that Japan was basically a closed-off society for most of its history, especially leading up to the 19th century when an American military vessel came and cracked it open to the international world stage. But after that point, after a quick civil war, they very rapidly industrialized and engaged with the world, and actually won a series of stunning wars where they were viewed as the underdog against major powers like Russia and China. So by the time we're here in the 20s and the 30s, Japan is really a rising power. And it's really rapidly changing in the span of a couple generations. It's entered the world stage. And so along with that comes the introduction of film. A little bit after it had reached other places, it reaches Japan as well. And so Japan is an interesting case because, as a lot of folks will know, it's very famous for its kind of very proper manners and its kind of concern with protocol culturally in a lot of sense. So all that to say, from the inception of film in Japan, the censorship was a very heavy factor. And there was actually a 1925 law, very Orwellianly titled the Peace Preservation Law, which specifically stipulated that films in Japan could not criticize their national essence, or kokutai, they call it, or criticize notions of private property or other basic fundamentals of capitalism and sort of the traditional lifestyle of that time. We have to remember this is in the context of socialism really taking off in many parts of the world. So the Japanese government was cracking down on that. However, in 1927, there was a major financial crisis called the Showa financial crisis, named after the first year of that Emperor Hirohito's reign, where it kind of culminated after a series of different factors. There was a major earthquake, government bonds, which had been very important for purchase throughout most of that decade. People started to lose their faith in the value of those, and there was a bank run. And at that point, the government fell, and a lot of Japanese citizens started questioning, this new modern lifestyle. And this is kind of similar to what we talked about with the Great Depression in the United States. You had all these people, they were introduced to these notions of, living in urban areas, working in capitalist enterprises, joining the middle class, social mobility. All that is thrown into question. And so in the same way that happened in 1929 in the United States, it happened a little bit earlier in Japan, which so often happens, I think, culturally with Japan. Seems to be a little bit of a snapshot of what we hold in the future at different points in history. But in any case, during that time period, there was a trend of what are called tendency films. So after 1929, as people are getting more, critical thinking about the world, studios start to capitalize on that and make these Japanese film studios make these kind of socially conscious, left-leaning films that are exploring topics that hitherto were just not discussed in Japanese society, challenging conventions of that work lifestyle and gender norms, even to some extent, and really a lot of values that were core to Japanese society at that time. Obviously, they were heavily censored, and reading about this time period, it's almost like a cat and mouse game of these studios, trying to get these films out because they were so commercially successful, but the government also trying to temper that. And so the film we're going to talk about today, after we watch, is called What Made Her Do It? And it was actually so controversial and inflaming when it was released in 1930 that there were significant riots in parts of the city of Tokyo on the part of the population after seeing it. So I'll be really interested to see, after watching it, how that shook out and what that spark was for that fuse, because unfortunately this period of tendency films was relatively short. As a lot of folks will know, at least folks that know about World War II, in the 1930s, pretty early in it, Japan shifted hard into basically a military dictatorship, with elements in the military taking over the civilian government. So they obviously clamped down on tendency films at that point, and actually a lot of tendency filmmakers later became propagandists, sadly, for World War II propaganda films. But in any case, this is going to be a really cool snapshot to examine. So I'm really looking forward to it. But I would love to hear, any first impressions or or insights or ideas you guys may have too.
Yeah, I'm just excited. Like, I'm glad that you found this through your research, because it's not a, period of film that I would have been aware of at all. And it's just really cool, especially when looking at the context of what was going on with labor, et cetera, in the US as well at the same time. But right. Excited to see the actual movie. I don't know anything about the actual like plot or anything, but I did read a little bit about its restoration. Because initially, after World War II, they thought this was a lost film, but in 1997, it was restored from an incomplete print that was found in like some Russian archive. So Russian shady archives have been a core of this podcast, and it seems like they were important here as well. But my understanding is that the opening scene, and I think potentially the ending or part of the ending were lost, so those are just replaced with title cards, just as like a heads up.
I was wondering if the reel on both ends maybe got singed or damaged just over time.
Oh, sure.
Sense,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, I'm going into it completely blind, so
yeah, I haven't looked at anything about the story. Yeah.
Either.
Yeah, apparently this movie triggered Japan's home ministry to like intensify their scrutiny of movie censorship. So excited.
Japanese Hays Code enacted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, then I wonder, is it like that violent, or is it just like because of the context?
We're about to find out.
Yeah, I guess it's true.
I realized I wanted to include in my spiel before. It felt cool because I remember in college, we were talking in my comparative politics class about examples of oligarchies. And after this financial crisis in 1927 is when the Zaibatsus, this collection of maybe like 5 major, originally family-based mega corporations, kind of took over the Japanese government and society. So it's just a very interesting time period in general. And Japan is such a unique example of a manifestation of like corporate and fascist elements coming together at this time that hopefully will come up as we discuss other conflicts, upcoming in our charting history here. But yeah, I remember when I read that word Zaibatsus, I was like, comparative politics 2012. Yeah, we're going back.
I do think it's interesting, and maybe something for us to keep in mind is that the director of this movie, Shigeyoshi Suzuki, he did 2 years later go on to make a bunch of propaganda movies for Japan. So I think it's like, I'm interested to see, like, there's some criticism of him floating around there in terms of like, is this like a legitimate like leftist movie or is it just kind of a doing it to do it because that's what was pushing the envelope at the time? And then because I'm so interested to see if there's any kind of like evidence of that floating around. But
well, you make such a good point there, Abby, because one of the things I did forget to mention when I ran across is one of the criticisms of tendency films from that time period, actually, and from the left, was from organizations like the Proletarian Film League of Japan and other more explicitly socialist entities, kind of criticizing them as cash grabs and kind of cheap melodramas. Right. So, we'll see. I mean, it's that whole thing that we always run into of, is this film with all its problematic elements still kind of pushing humanity in a positive direction, which is always an interesting debate, I think, to have. So we'll have to see. Obviously, the population of Tokyo found it to be upsetting to some extent.
Right.
So whether or not the message is genuine or just manufactured because it will be shocking or popular.
And like, how much does that matter, really?
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm ready.
Me too. Well, thank you guys for listening to us. We're going to get the movie going now, and we'll be right back with you to talk a little bit more about what made her do it. Okay, everybody, we are back after viewing the controversial Japanese tendency film classic, What Made Her Do It? Or in Japanese, also known as, what is it, Sarah?
何が彼女をそうさせたか.
So I'll give a little clap there. That was pretty cool.
Everybody clapped.
For those that don't know, Sarah recently got back from Japan, so she obviously did a good job researching there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did that just for this movie, actually.
Right. Just for this special month for our Patreon listeners.
Exactly. You didn't hit record? Okay, you pressed record. Now I need an authentic, like, oh my God, Sarah, wow, so cool. I'm kidding.
That was pretty impressive, though, like to hear you say, because I know you've been spending time learning Japanese. So I thought, from me, my untrained ears, the enunciation sounded like pretty spot on.
So now I have to go into a tangent, which is completely unrelated to this movie, but is related to my trip. So I don't know, you know how you can kind of tell when like people are really just happy that you're making an effort. And so rather than like trying to perfect your intonation, instead you kind of like play up that you're trying, if that makes sense. So basically we went to like an okonomiyaki restaurant where you cook your own okonomiyaki, so we had to have help from the woman who like owned it and was running it. So afterwards, like traditionally what you say at the end of a meal is gochisousama deshita. And so what I said, because she had just been super nice and we'd been speaking like broken English, broken Japanese to each other the whole time. So I said it more like gochisousama deshita, like with a question mark to be like, trying, is this right? And then she was like, oh, and then she clapped and literally people at the next table like clapped and we're like, oh, Josie, like everyone was, and I was just like, so like Taylor makes fun of me for it because he's like, you could say it better than that. I was like, I know, but it was the vibe, you know, it was the vibe that we were all trying. So that's what that felt like just now, Jake, when you were like, say it in Japanese. Say it for the audience.
I like to think that was the greatest moment of your life, being in that little okonomi.
It's top 10. It's top 10. Everyone was super sweet.
That's really great.
Yeah, it was really, really cute.
Very cool. Making us in a time period where Americans are not necessarily very well liked internationally. Thank you for giving us
back to like childhood of like when someone clapped the first time you said a phrase.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my, applause for me?
Maybe I will continue to learn to speak.
Maybe I will keep talking. So it was fun. It's a good time. Very different experience in Japan than Sumiko had in Japan in this movie.
Yeah, I guess that's a good segue here to start talking a little bit about this film that we watched. So as Sarah referenced there, the main character of our film today is a young girl named Sumiko, probably in her mid to late teenage years. The story opens on her in transit from her hometown to go and live with her uncle, ostensibly so that she can attend school in her uncle's town of Nita. On the way, she almost has an accident near a train, and she's helped by a kindly rickshaw man, an older rickshaw man who brings her back to his home and treats her to a very large and nourishing meal as she talks with pride and excitement about her upcoming journey to live with her uncle and better herself. So the rickshaw man gives her some kindness and some wisdom. She goes to bed, and as she goes to bed, we see the rickshaw man seemingly start sorting through her things, and we're left a little bit worried about what he's done there. But in any case, the next scene opens up with Sumiko arriving at her uncle's town, bidding farewell to the kindly rickshaw man, saying, hopefully we'll meet each other again. But then her circumstances change for the worse quite quickly. When she arrives to her uncle's, she finds that it is basically a very overcrowded hovel that he's living in with his wife and their many, many children of varying ages. They're desperately poor, struggling to make ends meet and to feed themselves. So Sumiko is a little bit shocked. She says, oh, I'm here to go to school. Here's a letter from my father. And her uncle takes the letter and reads it with his wife away from Sumiko. Well, it's revealed to us, the audience, that Sumiko's father was himself very impoverished and actually very ill, and he could no longer care for his daughter. And that's why he sends her away to live with his brother, who he hasn't spoken with in years and seemingly is unaware of his own struggling circumstances. They also discover that the father had sent some money with Sumiko. So they take the money, but jump ahead a little bit, and it's a bit of a montage type sequence of Sumiko living a very difficult life with her uncle's family, taking on working responsibilities, childcare, taking responsibilities, not going to school, basically living as a servant for her uncle. But this only lasts for a certain period of time. In between beatings from her aunt and caring for the children, her uncle arrives back with an older, kind of skeevy-looking gentleman who the uncle says she's going to now go live with. So we're left to believe she's basically been sold, essentially, to this man that they tell her is her father's friend, who, bear in mind, she does not know has committed suicide because she cannot read at this point. It's also revealed that the rickshaw man actually placed a coin, a silver coin, a valuable silver coin in her knapsack rather than taking anything. So an indication later of some kindness from that man. But we jump ahead now, and it turns out Sumiko has been sold to the circus. That creepy looking guy, he was actually a circus manager. And so she is now in an act that involves her, as we all can remember, those knife-throwing acts from carnivals and circuses. She's plastered to a board, and this man who's bought her is throwing knives all around her in a very harrowing act that we're led to think, she's lucky to survive it every time they do it. Well, she comes to connect with the other members of the circus troupe. They're all struggling. They're all very resentful of the manager, the owner of the circus, because they work and work and work, and they can barely get enough food to get by or money. Eventually, another circus performer discovers that her money is missing, and she goes into Sumiko's knapsack and sees that she has money from her father and from that rickshaw man, and assumes that Sumiko stole her money. And it causes a ruckus, and she's wailing on Sumiko basically when this other, again, as we say, orphan in the circus intervenes, a kind young man named Shintaro, who stops the beating and helps Sumiko to explain what happened, that it was her money. Well, tensions in the circus continue to escalate, and eventually the circus troupe bands together and sort of revolts against the manager. They all leave en masse and cause great mayhem, and Sumiko and the kind young man who helped her, Shintaro, escape on their own into the countryside. Well, they're on their way to Shintaro's hometown, where some of his family live, when he tells Sumiko to wait by the road while he moves on ahead to help with their journey, and he'll shortly return for her. Well, as they are separated, he's struck by a vehicle and taken by the people driving that car to a nearby hospital, unbeknownst to Sumiko. So she's just left on the side of the road, eventually assuming that she's been abandoned by Shintaro. We jump ahead now again, and Sumiko falls in with the wrong crowd, is taken advantage of by a band of thieves, and gets caught up in police who pick her up, but they ultimately realize that she was not at fault, but was more exploited by that criminal enterprise. And so she's sent to a workhouse, which for folks that don't know, in industrial times and even pre-industrial times, very poor people that couldn't find work or housing for themselves, they would often be housed in private charities or church workhouses, where they'd be assigned local work and have room and board for a period of time. So this is another environment where Sumiko connects with other brethren of her station who are also struggling in the workhouse. Folks can barely get enough food to get by. They can't even get enough nourishment to adequately breastfeed the babies that reside in the workhouses with their parents. So Sumiko helps other women with their babies and tries to eke out a living before she is assigned to work in the household of a local prominent politician as a maid with the household staff. It seems like this is a pretty nice setup for her. She's at least in an environment with other women getting adequate food each day. But we see pretty quickly that the wife of the prominent politician that's now employing her is quite abusive and condescending towards Sumiko and the other household staff. When Sumiko accidentally serves the young daughter of the household owner some fish with bone in it, and the daughter chokes a bit before being all right. This really angers the mother. This and some other factors lead to the mother really reaming out Sumiko verbally, and Sumiko is eventually pushed to her limit. The woman says, "You've never had it as good as living here." Sumiko stands up for herself and says she can take care of herself and chucks a bowl through a window. Well, obviously, this leads to her being terminated from her job, and we jump ahead another 3 years. She's now living and working in the household of a biwa instrumentalist master. She's essentially his live-in servant. We're led to believe she's basically locked in the house all day. Not necessarily good living circumstances either, but one that she's trying to make the most of. When one day she sees Shintaro, that old kind friend that she had from the circus, walking by outside. They spot each other. He comes into the house, talks with her for a bit. They reconnect, but shortly thereafter, Sumiko's owner / employer, the biwa master, arrives home. He seems to be okay with her talking with her old friend, but soon he's sent away, and they sit down to the meal, the biwa master and Sumiko, that night when this guy makes a move on her. We're led to believe he's aggressively, about to physically assault her, and she's obviously repulsed and scared by this. And she runs off, leaves the house, leaves that employment. Well, luckily, she's able to find and reconnect with Shintaro, who gave her his information for where he lives. And so they get married, and it seems like things are finally going to change for the better for Sumiko as she finds a partner in life. Well, that only lasts for so long, because even as hardworking and as optimistic as they are, Shintaro is soon let go from the theater troupe that he's worked with, and he just can't find other work. So the two of them are really struggling for a long period. They're writing to folks that they know, asking for help. No one can help them. And eventually they get to the point where they're ready to give up, and they decide to commit suicide by drowning themselves in the nearby ocean. Well, they attempt to do this, but Sumiko survives the drowning attempt. She's picked up by a search party, and they say it's a miracle she survived. She should be dead. And she's essentially committed to a women's institution run by a Christian church there in Japan for troubled women or women just on hardship. And so she is in there for a period of time. We jump ahead again. Sumiko now knows how to read. She's essentially started a new life for herself. She considers herself a Christian, and she is maybe not as happy as she could be, but she has some semblance of stability and purpose in her new environment. Well, because it's Sumiko and because this is a rough movie, one of her friends in this almost nunnery, she gets to a point where she's advanced far enough that she's being ready to be let out of the institution to live her life in public again. And there's a big ceremony. Everyone's excited about it. But as this friend is saying to Sumiko, "I've discovered your husband is still alive. When I get out there, if you'd like, I can pass a message along to him, and maybe the two of you can reconnect and you can find each other again." Well, Sumiko is actually reluctant to do this. It seems as though she's really turned over a new leaf in her own life, and turning back towards Shintaro would in many ways be a step back. So she doesn't really want to engage in this, but her friend kind of coerces her into it and gets her to write a letter to her erstwhile husband, who is in fact alive. So this letter falls out of her friend's robe as she's going to leave the institution, and the headmistress finds it. And she's enraged at the friend. And she says, "We're going to have to not let you out of here. In fact, we're going to put you in solitary confinement." Well, the friend is so terrified by this that she essentially blames the whole affair, the letter, the lies, on Sumiko to save her own hide, which of course redirects the headmistress's rage at Sumiko. The headmistress brings Sumiko aside in a room and says, "You're sham. You're not saved by God. You're not a true Christian. You've been holding back these lies. You have this man in the outside world that you're still longing for, and you need to confess to everyone in the institution in a very public way to try to have some semblance of salvation for your soul. Well, Sumiko is really angered by this because she considers herself a good Christian, and she tries to live by the codes involved with that, as she's tried to do the right thing and all these different tribulations in her life. So in the final moment, when she's asked to confess publicly in front of everyone, she has sort of a mental break, but also kind of sticks up for herself and says, actually, I now realize this whole sham of Christianity and religion is just that, all lies. I'm a good person. I've never done anything wrong, and I'm made now to humiliate myself in front of all of you. And she takes a Bible and throws it at the cross dramatically, causing an uproar in the women's institution amongst all the women there, and especially the headmistress. Well, that night, the building actually catches fire. It's not clear at first why, but we're told the headmistress gathers up all her riches and her belongings and flees to save her own hide, leaving all the women in the institution alone, unable to escape the flames. While we see in the center of the flame, well, we don't see, but we know in the center of the flames, we're led to believe, because this part of the film, unfortunately, was lost and explained in title cards, that Sumiko herself is the one who started the fire, and she's kind of manically dancing in the middle of everything. And she explains to one of the other women that she started the flames, and she's so resentful of what's happened in her life. And we're left to believe that basically everyone is enveloped by flames, and it's not a very happy ending to a very difficult life. So I can imagine it causing quite a bit of a stir for audiences that watched it at that time. But that's a summary, and I'm eager to hear what you guys think of what made her do it.
Eastland, except for Eastland goes apeshit at the end instead of falling off a cliff.
Which is an improvement by far, for sure.
I also think we do also get that moment in where she's kind of rebels against the counselor's wife that she's a maid to with the whole Fishbones debacle. Right. So I think it's very interesting to see those, like, actually get one of those moments. It's a shame that we lose the end of it. And, but yeah, that's what I was reminded of most firmly.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, definitely with each intertitle card, the ending, truly, it seems just everything escalated. Everything became, just like very destructive, and her character really getting to let loose in a very like violent way. And again, we're left with that question, right? What made her do it? It's like, well, everything that we saw leading up to this, obviously. Right. But I do kind of wonder, I had the thought while reading those title cards, because it's like, okay, we know parts of the film were damaged, parts of the film were lost, but with an ending that had that much potentially like sacrilegious imagery, I kind of wonder if it was intentionally destroyed at some point. But
that's what I was thinking, because as soon as the title cards came up for the ending, and it shows, well, it reads, she throws the Bible at the crucifix and all that, I was like, oh, maybe it was intentional as to why this footage doesn't exist.
Well, it makes me wonder what was the impetus for the oft-mentioned riots on the opening of this movie, because while there's definitely a lot of that criticism of exploitation, professionally, personally, throughout Sumiko's life, and all the characters are discussing it at different points, there's also, I imagine, we're left to believe, this really straightforward, as you say, anti-Christian imagery and rhetoric going on. And I wonder if that was something that really set off maybe Christian Japanese folks at the airing of this movie.
Potentially, or maybe it inspired other people who were also fed up with their circumstances. And they're like, damn, if she can set a fire like that and just like have that catharsis, I too would like to physically take action.
I'd like to believe that's the case. Yeah, that it was more people inspired to throw off their chains, for lack of a better term.
Right.
In terms of the content of the movie itself, I will say And sometimes I feel this way with silent pictures. It can feel very primordial, like we're going back to another time and people are still kind of figuring out how to do film. And this was one of the instances where I felt that pretty acutely because film came to Japan a little bit later than in the United States. So you do get a little bit of that feeling of them figuring out how to do the storytelling. It's not to say there aren't very impressive sequences visually, especially early on in the countryside when she's traveling. And then I think of some really interesting kind of mania-inducing camera angles at certain points as the tension is rising.
There's that really great, like, really fast, like, dolly in to the sign of the, like,
Heaven's Garden.
Yeah. There's a really great quick dolly in to the sign that's very, like, this is not a good thing, is the vibe. This is extra ominous. But
the thing that makes me sad is you're so often, I mean, you figure it out before too long, but you're so often led to believe, oh, Sumiko's finally found a safe environment where she can, settle down and start to put some roots down and improve herself. But the rug gets ripped out constantly. Even with Shintaro, that setting where we feel like she's finally got a partner in life, between the two of them, because of their circumstances, they just can't seem to make it work.
And that was ultimately because throughout the movie, based on the title, I guess my assumption ultimately with like what made her do it was going to be like a suicide, right? Something a little bit more tragic. And so when we got to that sequence where like Shintaro loses his job and they decide to do like a double suicide, I was like, okay, this is kind of what it's all leading up to, just the tragic end to a tragic life. But no, we get that third act. It's like, nope, keeps going from there. And then she loses it.
I'm glad too, because I feel like it's her claiming some agency finally. I mean, I don't know if the right answer is to burn down a building full of ostensibly innocent women that had very little to do with how you found yourself in life. But the act of her engaging in that destructive kind of nihilistic violence, in reaction to life that was just suffering, like you said, I think you're right that probably was the impetus for the unrest that followed the release of this movie. So many people seeing her life, seeing parallels in their lives and people they know, and saying, what's holding us back at the end of the day from sticking up for ourselves, whether it be verbally to our boss like she did or rioting.
Like I had the same thought you did, Sarah, with the double suicide scene where I was like, okay, so this is the way it's going to end. But then at the, obviously the ending was the big turning point and stuff like that. And I guess in the context of a viewer watching it at the time, let's say they maybe have a similar life, or they've been through a lot of turmoil in their life, and then they see this woman on screen or this girl on screen who's like, I've trusted people who were my family that ended up, giving me away. I trusted strangers that just ended up fucking me over, except for maybe like one, which is Shintaro, but even like surrendering myself completely to the ultimate higher power, which is God, and I'm still getting the shit end of the stick. So at that point, as a viewer, I can understand, watching that in a movie and be like, well, damn, I mean, if that's the case, like if not even God can help me, well then, might as well just, watch the world burn. Because at that point, then like essentially is like my life just fucked, essentially. Like it's just I'm at the whims of everyone else. And I guess in this case, like a higher power as well, who just doesn't really, even though like she starts to get, I would say like more of her agency, where she starts to, I guess, stand up for herself, like where she starts putting her foot down and not accepting like the mistreatment from her boss, which is that one girl. And then she runs away from the Biwa instructor when he tries to put the moves on her. And then once again, with at the church scene where, well, first of all, was it like a home that was a church, or was it more like a prison? Because the way the title cards made it seemed more like it was like a prison for these women, just because they were
I think it was the
in
latter.
poverty.
Okay. In that time period, in most countries, the state wouldn't necessarily take on the responsibility for that kind of social care. So you would have private institutions, mostly through churches, providing those types of environments, which obviously led to rampant dysfunction and abuse and things because they just weren't regulated adequately.
Okay. Yeah, because I wasn't too sure if it was more of like kind of like a nonprofit where they're trying to help the kind of community.
Ostensibly, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and then with the way the headmistress made it seem like put her in solitary confinement, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was kind of the point of when she was talking about, God is supposed to be forgiveness, but if you really followed that, then when I was asking you for forgiveness for something, first of all, that I did not even do, but the fact that you instead choose to like shame me in front of everyone, like it's all kind of bullshit. So yeah, very clear that they weren't practicing what they literally preach, and we're very much just treating it as
like a means for control, almost.
Yep,
like exactly. Just because of their circumstances, they now have to live out a weird devotion to God, but at the same time,
but it's more just like obedience to the headmistress, basically.
Yeah.
Well, it's just another instance of hypocrisy of institutions and employers and things they're led to believe culturally are there for a good reason and there to help them. We see at every instance, no matter where Sumiko turns, those traditional sources of authority and wisdom are actually either inept, abusive, or in all cases hypocritical. As that title card tells us, the headmistress, the first thing she does when the fire starts is she grabs the riches in the building and leaves everyone there, presumably to their deaths. Characters throughout the movie in all different settings comment on, the hypocrisy of their employer, the fact that they don't want to debone the fish themselves, or that would be too much of an inconvenience for them, and they all start laughing. I really enjoyed that about the movie. I think that that's a very timeless kind of, human response to any kind of class-based society, which we still live in as they did then. It was just much more brutal then. So I imagine that was very universally affecting for the audience.
I would like loop back to maybe the question that y'all had mentioned earlier, which is whether or not you guys could pick up on signs that this was like genuine, or if there were hints of other types of messaging that might not be like truly left or anything. I didn't pick up on anything, but my head empty. So
no, I think it's one of those things of it's impossible to say whether or not it was performative or not in terms of, especially as modern audiences, right, where we don't necessarily have the day-to-day context. I think probably, we won't ever know whether it was genuine or if it was just, to Jake's point and to like the proletariat film board of Japan, a cash grab, or if maybe he went and did propaganda pieces because that was how you continued to make movies in the culture that Japan was becoming, right? So we don't have any way of knowing. But I think that there is something interesting here in this movie in terms of, to Jake's point, talking earlier about the fact that at the end, the people who burn to death are not the headmistress. It's Sumiko and the other women in this institution, for lack of a better word. Kind of interesting in terms of having to operate in those power structures and struggle in that. And the only way to find your own agency is to essentially like become a monster in some sense of the only thing you can do is destroy.
Well, that would be where I would think the left criticism would come in of this movie. Abby,
that's kind of what I was thinking too, because of how you explained it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're sparking my thinking in the way you're talking about. The East Lynne comparison is so apt because this movie feels a little bit like torture porn, just like that did, where there's not necessarily a constructive, prescriptive. I don't think every movie has to, but if you're setting out to be, like I think these were sometimes marketed or thought of as a kind of transgressive message meant to inspire change, you don't necessarily want to just torture this woman for an hour and a half only to have her erupt in a burst of rage, because obviously that's just going to feed the flames of the authority figures saying, well, what's the alternative, right? you want to have her not just having those conversations with the other people in similar circumstances, but actually taking action together in a way to collectively, formulate a new reality. And that didn't necessarily happen. This was a very personal story, although you see those glimpses of those interactions. So I would understand if someone were to make that criticism, that it clearly defines a lot of the problems, a little bit short on solutions. But that obviously probably would have got it censored right away.
Right. And like y'all's conversation of it, again, just got my little hamster wheel turning. And yeah, no, definitely. I think if I were to take that lens of like, okay, you've identified the problems that we are all trying to like find solutions to, but your ending is that she, as an innocent woman who was just given the short end of the stick throughout this, finally has this like outburst, justifiably so, but only harms other innocent people, in perpetuating this sort of cycle, then it does seem like it loses that deeper message. And so that just makes me feel like that propaganda was genuine. So that's where I land.
Done. Mystery solved.
I really wanted to see a happy ending when I don't want to call her the friend, but like that girl was like, "Oh, your husband's alive." Yeah. I was like, I was shocked at first.
I don't know.
I liked that she didn't want to go back to him, though. I thought that was kind of neat because, I think she finally had realized her salvation wasn't going to be through another person, which is big.
Which she's like, look, at the first sign of things being difficult, this man loses his job and he's like, let's kill ourselves, both of us. She's like, and I'm kind of
kind of a Japanese thing, but
right.
But still, I don't know. I just, because like everything that we saw that she went through, I was just terrible. Like, I just wanted some happiness for her. Like, I mean, she experienced it a little bit, like for a brief moment, but I was just like, just throw this poor girl a damn bone. Like,
it was very helpless or hopeless, very bleak movie.
But I guess in the end, like it kind of can be interpreted as a happy ending for her, at least, where she's just like fed up, where she's not holding anything in, and she just unleashes. And I'm assuming we're supposed to suspect that she died in the fire, right?
Right, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I guess. I mean that can be kind of freeing.
I mean, her difficult journey is over. And she planned on committing suicide anyway, so technically she's just doing it for real this time. But instead of with like this sad little like, oh, I'll die with my husband, she's like, fuck you. As she goes.
Like the way you put it. She had her Carrie moment.
Yeah.
Look, like the title card says, life sucks and then you die. So might as well.
It did warn us from the outset.
Like grab the death by the throat.
I see. This is why I said head empty. I totally forgot that the title card literally was like, life is suffering and then we die.
Which I have to tell you, very Buddhist. When I read that title card, I was like, okay, maybe this is going to be like a Buddhist theme, but I don't know. They didn't really, again, no positive prescriptive solutions at any point, really. I have to say, I'm impressed because I had that kind of Western, probably Orientalist backward perspective that Japanese culture up until after the war was universally very kind of repressed. So, as we said from the outside, to even learn that there were these several years where there was this kind of countercultural spark is really neat. It's just such a good reminder that we're all so fundamentally the same, wherever we are on the planet. We want the same things. We face a lot of the same challenges, and we seek to manifest collectively our angst and our hopes to eventually get past them. And it's just really cool because it's an environment, a setting where I wouldn't have thought that would have existed. But here we are in Japan, 1930, and they're making films that, deal with themes that we're still dealing with now.
Yeah, I will say that the story, even though it was pretty tragic, like it was pretty gripping. Like I was hooked pretty much from the beginning. Like I don't think there was a point anywhere in the film when I was watching where I experienced a lull in anything. Like I was always just kind of on the ride of what's going to happen next. So I think that's good because sometimes, like, especially with watching older films and silent films more so, I feel like it can kind of, like with Nosferatu, when we watched that and we were like saying it kind of like dragged on a lot, or some parts of it were kind of, I guess, boring for lack of a better word. With this one, it was just more involved, I guess. Like I felt like I was going through these events with Sumiko. And then, I thought the filming was good too. Like there were a lot of good shots, I guess, where they were interesting, like whether it was like viewing her from a perspective or a certain angle, or even like a landscape. Like one of the ones that keeps popping up into my head was when she was with the
Shawman.
Yeah, the rickshaw man. And they were in his little cart, and it kind of shows, it lines up the camera with the hill kind of like at an angle, and they're up top.
That shot's really beautiful.
Yes, and it reminds me of a lot of scenes that they do use in animes too, where you have that hill at the bottom, and then they're kind of like on top, and then they're viewing either like a town, a village, or something in the distance. And so just immediately like very... I don't want to say magnifying. I'm at a loss for a word for it, but just like it's you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's you just know it was a good call.
Visual language.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that scene that you're talking about was just like, oh, this is very beautiful and very immersive, right? It makes it easy to kind of picture what that was like. So I feel like Lord of the Rings uses that a lot too.
Yeah.
Also really love that shot where in the same scene where you are seeing the like power line tower.
Exactly.
I think when we were watching it, Jake, you pointed out like it's such an interesting like mix of visuals, like this very rural characters, and then you are seeing like modernization literally right there in the field. Is like such an interesting time. I also think sometimes it can be really hard to watch like a lost film that's been recovered and they've had to do a ton of work to remaster it and re-release it just because the film stock is so degraded. And there are definitely points in this where it's like hard to see and that kind of thing. But weirdly enough, I feel like, I mean, it would be spectacular to have this movie in its original format and its original quality. But I feel like this is one of the times where I don't mind the degraded footage. Like weirdly enough, those scenes where there's a couple places where the quality of the stock gets so bad that it's kind of like just blurry images and that kind of thing. Or you have a lot of light leaking in the scene where the boats are going out to try and rescue Sumiko and her husband from when they've tried to commit suicide. And they just look so interesting and weirdly good in a way that I'm sure was not the original intention. I'm sure that's not what they originally looked like, but they're so compelling anyway, which is, I don't know. I think it's interesting to see how age and kind of like the history of not just the movie itself, but like literally the history of the film stock can kind of contribute to the story that a movie is eventually telling you.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, folks, thank you for joining us for another bonus episode. As per usual, we will be back soon with another one of our main story episodes, as we sometimes call them. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to going on this journey and continuing it with you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening.
Abby, you have to say thank you now too. We must all say thank you to the audience.
No, I'm not thanking them.
Okay. Goes up in flames. Okay.
I won't be constrained by the power structure demanding things from me.